So Ubisoft provided me with a review copy of Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, and I'm about 15 hours into the game so far, and wanted to give you guys my general thoughts thus far. I'll do this similar to what I did for Assassin's Creed Mirage. In this video, I'll give my general first impressions and thoughts on the game with no spoilers, and then once I fully finish the game, I'll get to work on a more in-depth review that I'll put up in the near future. And all the footage you're going to see in this video will be from the early hours of the game and will contain no spoilers. Now, I haven't covered this game a whole lot on my channel in the build-up to its release. When we first started getting a lot of gameplay footage a little over a month ago, I made a video discussing whether or not Ubisoft could pull this game off. It looked a lot like Far Cry, that's pretty much what everybody was saying, and whether or not that's a good or bad thing just depends on who you ask. But after playing the game, yes, the Far Cry influence is very clear, but to me, that's not a deal breaker. I like Far Cry, and I find the formula to be fun, even if it has gotten a bit stale in recent years for me, but Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora still does quite a bit to distinguish itself from Far Cry, even if the general structure is mostly the same, I'd say. And obviously, a big part of that is because it's an Avatar game. I have no doubt that fans of Avatar are really going to enjoy this game. Pandora is breathtaking, there's lots of lore and references to the movies. For those who have dreamed of immersing themselves in the Avatar universe in an open world game, I think this will satisfy them. Similar to how Hogwarts Legacy did that for fans of Harry Potter. For those who aren't Avatar fans, it's probably not going to be anywhere close to as enjoyable, and it still feels like a Ubisoft game. The structure of the world, the story, the gameplay, it's all pretty standard Ubisoft, but with the Avatar IP, it's obviously gonna appeal a lot more to those fans. I like Avatar, I'm by no means a die-hard fan, I don't have extensive knowledge of the lore and everything, but I've been enjoying this game. It's by no means perfect, it has its shortcomings, and it does share a lot of similarities with other Ubisoft open worlds, but I'm having a pretty good time with it. Most of that is because of Pandora, which has to be my favorite part about the game, the world itself. I think Pandora is one of the more visually striking open worlds we've ever seen in a Ubisoft game. It looks fantastic, as we could already tell just from all the trailers, but seeing it on YouTube in a heavily compressed video is one thing, playing it on a 4K monitor is another. It really does make for a perfect setting for an open world game as well because of how unique it is. The amount of foliage and all the different unique plants, wild animals, and biomes is pretty insane. The world itself almost feels like a character because there's just so much alive within it. You have all these different plants that react to your actions. Some give speed boosts, others you can jump off of like a trampoline, some will blow up and poison you. This game has had around 7 years of development, I believe, and it's clear to me that a lot of that went into this world. Not only is it very dense with life and detail, but it's also absurdly big. The scale of this world really hit me when I was about 8 hours in and realized I had still only seen about 20% of the map. It's no joke. This game is running on the Snowdrop engine, which was used for the Division games, and is now also going to be used for Star Wars Outlaws and the next Far Cry game presumably, and this gives me a lot of optimism for how good those games are going to look, because this engine looks fantastic in Avatar. It's gotta be one of Ubisoft's best looking games to date. I don't think I'd go as far to say it's one of the best looking games I've ever played, but I mean, wow, it's still beautiful. But there are some drawbacks to its beauty. I had some performance issues with this game. I played on PC, and I'm gonna leave my PC specs in the description if you're curious, but for the most part, I was getting good, consistent frame rates on this game. However, there are some areas that get really bad frame drops for me, and when I first started, I had this horrible stuttering issue. For some reason, when I tried to play on my 4K monitor at first, I would get stuttering in the open world, and it was very noticeable in the cutscenes, making it borderline unplayable, but when I switched to my 1440p monitor, it was all absolutely fine. I contacted Ubisoft about these issues. None of the fixes they recommended worked. However, about 2 days ago from the time this video goes up, there was an update to the game that completely fixed the stuttering issue for me. I can run the game perfectly fine without stuttering on my 4K monitor now. I still thought it was worth bringing up just in case, but that issue has been resolved. resolved for me. I definitely recommend though that if you don't have a high-end PC, that you check the recommended specs for this game before you buy it, because it's still pretty demanding to run well. Like I said, even now I still run into certain areas of the world where I get some ugly frame drops. But in terms of bugs, I can't really recall any off the top of my head so far. If I have run into some, they haven't been major because I can't even remember them. Now, that's been my experience. It could be different for others and I'm just getting lucky, but it's been a smooth experience so far in terms of bugs. Again, the technical issues are a separate thing, but I haven't had any game-breaking bugs yet. I do want to talk about the exploration mode for this game though. For those who have played a lot of recent Ubisoft games, I'm sure you know what this is. You get an option between a guided and exploration mode. And in exploration mode, the game won't give you markers or tell you where to go for your objectives. It'll give you some hints as to the general area, and then you're left to discover it on your own. A lot of Ubisoft open world games have this now, and Avatar is one of them. Obviously, you get the choice, you don't have to do exploration mode. I personally like it. I think it just feels a bit more freeing to the player, and the game is actually making you use your brain to find where to go. Although, on the flip side, it can be a bit frustrating when you can't find a specific area or end up getting lost. I've gotten lost a few times already, and it can feel like a waste of time, but generally, I think it's worth it. I'd recommend it, but some people might just prefer to have the guided mode and not have to search for each location or item. Alright, but that's enough about Pandora for now. Let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay overall is actually a bit better than I was expecting it to be, honestly. I really kind of was just expecting a Far Cry clone when it came to gameplay, and while it is still similar, I like some of the differences in Avatar. You're playing as a Na'vi, not a human, so the general gameplay loop is a bit different. You don't really realize how big you actually are until you encounter humans and man-made structures. I mean, you feel like a giant compared to regular people, and it's for sure a power fantasy. You punch a tiny human and they'll go flying back like 10 feet. You're very athletically gifted, and there's more that makes you feel like a Na'vi than just the blue skin. The movement was surprisingly a lot better than I thought it would be. You get quite a bit of movement mechanics like a charged jump, double jump, the sliding feels good, you can jump from far heights, climb and jump from tree to tree, there's plants that grant you different temporary boosts. The movement's actually a lot of fun and more in depth than what we're used to in Far Cry. I really like doing tree parkour in this game, it feels really good. Overall, the movement is just a lot better than what I was anticipating. The combat is quite satisfying too. You don't have nearly as many options for weapons at your disposal as, say, Far Cry, but they're each fun to use in their own way. The main weapon type is really the bows. The bows are super satisfying to use. I really like using a bow and arrow in video games in general, and Avatar has some of the better bow gameplay I've played in a video game. They feel so powerful, from the sound design to the adaptive triggers, and just the pure power and velocity you launch these arrows with. They absolutely annihilate regular humans. There's some variety to it too, as you can get different arrow types with different bows. Like I said, this is some of the most fun I've had with a bow in a video game. They did a great job at making it feel extremely powerful. You also get some human weapons, like an assault rifle. Not quite as fun or unique to use, there's not much variety to it either. You can get different designs and modifications for the assault rifle, but it really doesn't change too much of how the gun actually feels. You can get modifications that give like 8% extra weak spot damage or something like that, which is disappointing. I was hoping for actual attachments like extended magazines, suppressors, something like that, not just stat boosts. I also don't love the leveling system and gear scores. I didn't feel these were necessary inclusions, and it's really frustrating to me running into an enemy that's higher leveled, and I just can't deal any significant damage to it at all. Some people may feel differently about this, but I really don't feel this game needs levels and gear scores. I'm kind of tired of seeing this in so many open world games too. The stealth was also disappointing to me in this game. I'm a big fan of stealth games, but stealth in Avatar Frontiers of Pandora is very simple and streamlined. This is an area I feel Avatar is worse than the Far Cry series. You just don't have many options in stealth. You can't even do a stealth takedown like in Far Cry or most stealth games in general. The closest you can do is just get behind a human and punch them or eject them out of the amp suits. course. Don't get me wrong, punching humans is fun, but I was hoping for some actual takedown animations that Ubisoft is so well known for in these open world stealth games. Avatar also has a pretty big emphasis on some survival mechanics. I think the best comparison to Avatar I can think of is Far Cry Primal. A lot about these two games are very similar. The weapon types with heavy emphasis on using different types of bows, gathering plants and food, hunting, having to eat to fill your energy bar and survive, crafting, cooking, etc. It does bother me though that there's no animation for eating in this game. This may seem like a nitpick, but I find it immersion breaking that there's no animation whatsoever for when you eat something in your inventory. Your energy bar just fills up and nothing happens. It may be a small thing, but it does bother me. Like, why not just have an animation for eating? It seems lazy to me. Far Cry Primal has it after all, so why not this game? It's not like that's a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, of course, but I do find it odd. But traversal is a big part of the gameplay too. Typically, in most open world games, I choose to avoid fast traveling as much as I can. I want to explore and go to all the different locations myself, but with this game, especially at the beginning, I found myself fast traveling a lot because the world is huge and there's a lot of ground to cover between objectives, and it felt slow going from one mission to the next. But this gets so much better once you tame your Ikran and can fly across the world. The Ikran makes the game a lot better in general. It makes the traversal far more enjoyable to me. Plus, you can engage in aerial combat, which is really fun as well. Overall, the gameplay isn't extremely innovative. If you've played Far Cry, you probably know what to expect, although, as I pointed out, there are some nice changes and differences, but all in all, it's nothing too special. I've still been having fun with it though. But let's talk about the story itself. Ubisoft Massive did work with Lightstorm, who makes the Avatar movies, of course, and while I'm obviously not finished with the main story yet, I do still have some thoughts. First of all, in this game, you do create and customize your own Na'vi. The character is supposed to be you. In fact, you don't even get a name, the subtitles just refer to the character as you. But your Na'vi does still speak, and you get 3 different choices for the voice. I found how they did this kind of strange. They want the player to feel like the main character. That's part of why it's in first person and why you can freely customize your Na'vi. But the character isn't mute, and you don't get any dialogue choices. So I can't really say I feel like my character, because my character is acting and talking completely separate from me. If they wanted to go down this route of making you, the player, feel like the main character, then it would have made sense to either play as a mute character, or if you're going to have a voice, then give the player dialogue options and choices. Instead, it's like this weird hybrid where your character doesn't have a name or identity, but you can't fill in the blanks for your character by deciding what to say. I just find the way they handled the main character bizarre, and it ultimately just makes the protagonist feel bland. I wish I could say more, but there's not much to say, other than your character is trying to rediscover their Na'vi heritage as you were raised by humans. But there's no defining character traits or personality to this character. It's like a blank slate. And if that's what they were aiming for, then it may have been better to have a mute protagonist like in Far Cry 5 and New Dawn. Main character aside, the story so far has been okay to me. There's this very linear introduction with about 10 to 15 minutes worth of cutscenes with no gameplay that sets up the whole premise of the game, which I thought was a good opening. It was dark, sad, emotional. It reeled me in, but since then, it's kind of faded out for me. I haven't encountered many memorable characters. Some of the Na'vi are cool, and there's a bunch of quirky human characters, you know, typical Ubisoft stuff. But overall, I just don't feel that invested in the story right now. Maybe it picks up again towards the end, but since the opening, I've had a hard time getting into it. It feels like your typical Ubisoft story. It's not terrible, it's not great. For me, it's okay. I feel like a story set in the Avatar universe shouldn't be bland or generic, but it kind of is. It does tackle similar themes as the movies with human cruelty, protecting the environment and the wildlife and everything, but I'm just having a hard time getting into it. For big Avatar fans, I'm sure it's easier to look past and get invested in, and it's probably the exact opposite for those who don't care for Avatar. A lot of it depends on how big of a fan you are of this franchise. But even the structure and plot of the story itself feels similar to Far Cry. You're in a rebellion fighting against a strong, opposing, tyrannical faction with a main villain at the top. That sounds like the exact premise of nearly every single Far Cry game. I don't know, maybe I'm just being a negative Nancy here, but I feel like I've seen this kind of story a lot, especially in Ubisoft games. I wasn't expecting some kind of masterpiece from the story to begin with, but I did think the Avatar lore would be enough to pull me in, but so far, it's kind of failed to do so. Who knows, maybe I haven't gotten to the best part yet. I'll of course come back to this subject once I finish the game and have a full review out, but so far, this is how I feel. But that about wraps up my general impressions of Avatar Frontiers of Pandora so far. Overall, I've enjoyed the game. It's pretty much what I expected it to be. It's not great, it's not bad, it's fun, and it's got a stunning open world. The world of Pandora is what ultimately has been keeping me playing. Now, would I recommend this game? To Avatar fans, I absolutely would. Even if this isn't a masterpiece, I still think it's enough to satisfy fans of the universe. To those who aren't Avatar fans, if you like Far Cry or just want a beautiful open world game to play, I think you may like this, even if you don't have much knowledge about Avatar. But if you're tired of Far Cry and Ubisoft open world games, I wouldn't recommend it. It still very much feels like a Ubisoft game, and plenty of you know what I mean by that. So I hope that's helpful to some of you. If it is, let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and considered subscribing to the channel if you're new. Once again, thank you to Ubisoft for giving me a review copy. And other than that, thanks for watching everyone, and have a great rest of your day.